happy to have again Dr. Joachim Schwerin, Principal Economist at the European Commission, joining us on RULEMATCH Spot On. He was one of the major contributors and helpers in drafting the MiCA regulation in the EU, Markets and Crypto Assets Regulation. He's also a frequent contributor and commentator on all things crypto and digital assets, especially related to the real economy. Dr. Joachim Schwerin, welcome.
It's a great pleasure, Ian, to be here again in this beautiful environment. Thank you very much for having me again.
Super. So just about 3 months ago, we had a conversation more in depth about MiCA, where it came from, what's behind it, what's in it, everything about that. I'd be interested now to get your perspective on how it has come over the finish line, and then in particular, what kind of reactions people have had, not so much in the EU, but from countries around the EU looking at this landmark thing that has happened.
I think indeed, as you mentioned, these last 3 months, Ian, have been intense, and we have been able to finalize the last remaining work items. The discussion on the level 2 standards and MiCA has now turned fully into application. That is a major milestone, and now of course we have to see what the next steps and what the reactions will be. But I must say it has been very interesting times if you look back for the last 2 years. I think 2 years ago everyone was very excited that MiCA came about, not only in Europe, also beyond. Everyone thought that it was an interesting experiment to go forward. Then a year ago, everyone realized that this now becomes really serious, that we mean it, that it has not only entered into force, but also the details will be developed. And then there was a, I would say, major discussion that we might overshoot and you are too strict on stablecoins, you don't get too much demand in terms of licenses, etc. So it was a little bit a doomsday scenario. And now, after the finalization of the whole thing, the interesting thing is that really this discussion has very much matured. So now we are in a very, I would say, realistic mind frame where we see that actually we have a number of open issues, of course, which is inevitable if you have so many detailed rules also in the level 2 standards that need to be fine-tuned, and where everyone, the market side, but also the regulators still need to develop an understanding of what does all of that mean, how will we implement that in practice. The process has not been too smooth in a number of countries, you've seen that, but at the same time we have, I would say, in my interpretation, a remarkable number of requests for licenses or already granted licenses. This is perhaps more than I would have expected a year ago, so I see that part of the market is accepting that this is the reality. Of course, we discussed it in our last discussion that MiCA only covers a relatively small space of the crypto space. So of course not everyone needs to be concerned, but those that are concerned are mostly taking a constructive approach, which is very good. The interesting part for me also in MiCA is not only this technical discussion that we just referred to, but also the meta-political aspects. I mean, for the first time, if you look really into harmonization of crypto assets regulatory systems on the country level, we have now 30 countries that have come together, 27 in the EU plus 3 associated countries that have now finally given themselves a set of rules. And that is a massive thing, because contrary to smaller countries where basically you draft something and then the government or the king or whomever just grants that thing and it is in practice, here we have a very complex political process. We have 3 phases. We have the technical drafting of the proposal. We have then the political discussion with all the member states and the European Parliament. And then at the 3rd level, we have basically thousands of people coming in at national level, but also from the European regulators to fine-tune that. And this is a very interesting lecture in how you can actually steer and influence these extremely complex political processes, where I think much of the global reaction that we see is now also turning to these meta aspects. The details are more or less clear with certain points that still need to be fine-tuned. But the whole process as such can be very interesting if you look into further global harmonization of how can you actually do that, because what you put in at the beginning is very far away in a way of what you get at the end.
And speaking about global reactions and different things, we know that there have been some changes after U.S. elections. Yes. There, the incoming administration seems to be signaling more regulatory openness towards crypto, which is obviously a change. At this point, what do you think that means for kind of the economics of regulation in crypto? The European Union being very not fast maybe, but first, then now other places come along. Will perhaps the US have a fast follower advantage? And what does that mean for kind of the global harmonization or balance of power, so to say, in markets, in crypto assets?
I think that time has become a very relative concept, especially when you look at very fast-moving tech markets, and crypto is part of that. So there is certainly an advantage for everyone now that can take MiCA and can take a look and say, this is good, this is perhaps what we would like to change, or which might work better if we phrase it differently in our country. Every advantage, if we were to call it like that, that you could get out of that would be a very temporary one. So I'm not really concerned that MiCA or the European Union will now be placed in a relative disadvantage because someone will now take the shortcut in taking MiCA, improve a little bit and put it into force. Because we have so much momentum on crypto markets that even if this was a strategy, it would be replaced very quickly by other developments. I mean, look at the discussions that we have now out there. Of course, we have a certain hype in the US. I see that from many people that I talk to who are to the largest extent positive about changes because they think that the new administration in the US will be more open towards crypto. We will see what that delivers at the end of the day. But at the same time, first, there is a massive space on crypto that would probably not be regulated there either. We haven't regulated the whole decentralized space, but also other things. Secondly, a year ago, we had this massive focus on the convergence between blockchain and AI. Now we have, and everyone has seen it coming, a third player in the room, which is basically quantum computing. And what does it mean? You've seen the recent discussion about the Google chip, and even the guys that developed it seem to have a limited understanding of why it works the way it does work. So that is, of course, a nightmare in a way for the regulatory domain, because how can you not only understand all these developments that are coming together, but how can you shape policy for that? So I think the much more relevant aspect for me is not that someone takes our regulation and makes it a little bit better. They are welcome to do so. But that we have contributed, in my opinion, a massive learning experience to everyone that contributes to the global discussion. And I can only hope that many other parts of the world, we see that already, take their own approach, make that transparent, try these things out, see how it will work, and then everyone can take the bits and pieces that work and further improve them. And I think that is also something that we will be discussing here in the next couple of days. How do you see global harmonization? Is that competition or is that convergence? I would never see global harmonization, if it is possible at all, I don't know to what extent that will be, as competition, because the digital space is so big and you can do so many things that whatever you do, you find your corner somewhere. So I would see it more as a cooperative game where if we work together with our limited resources in a specific area and others do it in their area and we can build on that, that would be the ideal way forward.
So in a sense, bringing the entire space forward, no matter what the next step or what the next development is.
No, because look, I mean, I have always taken the approach, and I will continue to do that, that I see blockchain and crypto as a game changer for a bottom-up approach for self-organization of communities. Now, I love Bitcoin, but I couldn't care less what effect on Bitcoin, for example, now the fact has that a certain country has a new administration. That is a very short-term thing. I think what we are talking about here goes much deeper. It is really about how technology can change our societies for the better. And that is something that is independent from daily political news or whatever, because that more relates to how communities, developers, people on the ground are able to build that technology, are building use cases. And for me, that's the massive question I'm also looking forward, because if you still allow me to say that sentence, for me, the most relevant current question is not so much what will now happen after MiCA. It is not so much, although it's massively important, how do blockchain, AI, quantum, etc. relate to each other. But if you move to Web3, there's a fundamental difference in terms of approach between Web 2 and Web 3. Mm-hmm. And I think that Web 2, you know, that is a sort of big tech infested negative space. But the good thing for them was at the time that they had the use case and then built infrastructure around the use case. What we see in Web 3 in crypto today is that, in my opinion, we have a massive imbalance between much too much infrastructure that is being built in parallel with too few use cases that are building on top of that. You have all these layers 1s and layer 2s emerging, and they are competing. And at the end of the day, the question is, what does it serve to? We haven't answered that question yet. So the real call out there is not so much about more or less regulation or what regulation. It is about building use cases so that we have material to work upon when we then do the policy approach. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about one use case in particular. I know you've spent a lot of time down in the weeds looking at different innovations in crypto and all of those different things, especially as mentioned as it relates to the real economy. I know here in St Moritz, the Crypto Finance Conference, you'll be talking on a panel discussion about the balance or the rivalry between public and private money, which of course implies stablecoins that haven't been a part of MiCA. How do you think public versus private money plays out, in 2025, but in a longer term as stablecoins? We've seen many of them come up very, very quickly, more projects coming up, and different mechanisms, different companies backing them, different assets backing them. It's a big topic. How do you think that plays out?
I think if you approach it from the demand side, or as my friends here would say, from the buy side, there are so many different preferences in terms of what businesses, but also what citizens want in terms of use cases, of payment systems, of crypto applications, that there is a massive call for a parallel development of different solutions, which can be private or public or private-public in a way. So it's not about talking whether a CBDC is the best thing to have or a stablecoin is the best thing to have, or if we now look at tokenized deposits or real-world assets or whatever. But there's a place for all of that. I would even go as far as saying that probably in the next 5 to 10 years, we will not have the dominance of one of these solutions, because there's a different structure, not only in terms of demand, but also how you approach risk. Traditional industrial companies want to continue the relations with their banks, especially in continental Europe. They are looking for private bank-based solutions on tokenized deposits and assets. There's the crypto community that might be more interested in stable coins. There is the state that says, okay, we need to take care of monetary policy and see what happens with the monetary anchor that we have. How can we still influence really the money supply through the central bank system, given that allegedly we have less demand for cash, which is dubious, but let's not discuss this now. So what could be the control lever in the future? That would be a CBDC, but is it then retail? Is it wholesale whatsoever? Every single project that I'm aware of, and I know many in all these domains, face one type or another of concrete practical problems. Whether that's retail CBDCs from the demand side, who wants that really from a privacy perspective, whether that is wholesale, who can program yet an infrastructure that can scale enough to be interoperable, whether that's stablecoin, where the traditional players are saying, can I really trust these guys, whether that is then the traditional crypto space. And what we now are seeing, which I find very interesting, take one example, which I just mentioned as one of many examples. PayPal, who are now going as an established player in the space of having developed their own stablecoin, taking a longer term approach. We have that discussion later today. So there are many exciting, I would say, crossover projects now that combine respected entities that can be either private or public with new technology and tools that are available. And I think the next few years will see a time of a lot of experimentation, a lot of very small practical steps. And whoever finds a broad enough base to attract demand and interest will have a first mover advantage in this space. But the call is out there on what will that precisely be, because honestly, I'm not fully convinced by any project that I've seen so far that it can reasonably argue to be sufficiently developed in a year or so. We are not there yet.
Yeah. So a little bit longer term perspective on many of those
Take
things.
a longer term perspective, but be patient, because I see from so many discussions, including what I have here, is that we are luckily beyond the phase where we are still discussing in certain companies or exchanges, whatever, with the C-level of whether that is really something that we should work upon. I think now we have matured to the phase where everyone knows that in the future, if you want to be in the market, you have to look into DLT-based systems. But also everyone that you can have an open discussion with tells you very clearly that honestly, this is a moving target, and we try to troubleshoot every day, but we cannot give you a guarantee that we have the transition to a completely DLT-based system ready in the foreseeable future, at least when you are a traditional, I would say, TradFi or institutional player. The cryptos promise you what they can, and I think it's legitimate for them to do so. But also there, we haven't seen the killer use case yet, and I think that's the long shot to have one.
Very, very interesting. Dr. Schwerin, thank you very much for joining us again. Super to get a short update from you and your insights. Looking forward to see what 2025 brings.
Looking very much forward. Great pleasure to have been here.